So the brackets are out, but let's start with our Nuggets. Canada played Spain in their final game of the group stage, and they won that game. They went 3-0. They were already guaranteed a spot in the quarterfinals, but this allowed them to be the top seed in their group. Canada, I think, has had stretches where they look really good defensively. But honestly, for the most part, I have yet to see a game, whether it was in exhibition play or in the tournament, where they looked truly impressive, if that makes sense. And, I think some people have already clocked some of the issues that Canada was going to have in the tournament just because of their personnel. Right now, their big rotation is primarily Dwight Powell and Kelly Olynyk, and Trey Lyles is playing some kind of 4 and 5 in there as well. They're really having issues rebounding, and that was a huge problem against Spain, which Spain isn't even that big of a team, and they don't have any like dominant interior force that you would think would particularly pick on that issue. But it was really, it felt like a concerted group effort on the part of Spain to acquire 17 offensive rebounds in recall that in FIBA the games are only 40 minutes. 17 offensive rebounds would be absurd, unacceptable. Like the the coach would be yelling at everybody in the locker room in an NBA game, a 48-minute game with many more possessions than they have in FIBA. In a 40-minute game, it's just almost inexplicable. I wasn't sure, maybe Canada wasn't trying as hard in this game, especially at the beginning. I felt like they didn't have quite the level of, defensive focus that I personally feel like they're going to need in the knockout rounds because I, again, have yet to be impressed with their offense, but defensively they were kind of like mid, kind of at best. They were getting cooked by this Spanish guard, Brusuela, who, I mean, he was doing everything on the ball, off the ball. Rudy Fernandez was being a menace, uh, as he is sometimes in international play. And yeah, I wasn't impressed with the overall game plan, but they were able to eke it out because they have SGA, they have all of this talent.
Mhm.
Andrew Nembhard had a good game, 18 points, right? Yeah, well, what did you think of Canada's performance in this game? And maybe you could talk a little bit about how Jamal Murray in particular looked, coming off the bench here.
Yeah, I think in the friendly games, I was pretty low on Canada, and I even said I didn't think they would make it to the semifinal, which we're about to make predictions in a bit here, and I'll probably pick them to actually make the semifinals, even though I'm not super impressed with them either. Like you said, I think you're right about that. I don't know. Sometimes when I just looked at their roster and it's Kelly Olynyk and Powell, and I look at some of the other guys on the team, I was like a little underwhelmed with the roster. But the more that I've watched these games, the more that I see that, the more just talent or versatility and depth you have overall, you can outlast teams like Spain, like we just
Hmm.
saw.
You've
You
talked
know,
a little bit about Canada applying ball pressure as a way to kind of augment that advantage, right?
yeah, against
You know,
Australia, I saw that that was what they were trying to do for sure. Did you see any of that, like against Spain in particular? Anything that they
yeah,
were
I mean,
trying?
I just kind of agree with you. I think
Yeah.
that at all times they can have at least one of Lou Dort, Dylan Brooks, Nikhil Alexander Walker, Andrew Nembhard on the floor. All those guys are good, at least at the guard position, and even some bigger wings in the case of Dort and Dylan Brooks. They're great point of attack defenders, and those guys applying ball pressure, it does wear teams down, especially. And when you think about in FIBA the importance of guard play to the other team's offense, if you can disrupt that in any way, you can be cool. In this particular game, I thought they were very inconsistent with not the ball pressure itself, but everything that has to happen on the backside to make that viable. We've also talked on the podcast before about some of the pitfalls of overuse of ball pressure as your kind of main defensive tool, right? Because
Hmm.
teams can take advantage of that, whether it's you know setting higher screens, forcing cross matches, etc. I don't think the ball pressure itself was really like the problem in this game with Canada's defense. I thought it was just inconsistency in everything else, and in particular that defensive
The
rebounding.
rebounding. Yeah, I mean, Spain was playing for their lives in this game. If they needed to win it to stay in it. And
That's right.
so, as much as Canada seemed to lack some execution, it's not like Spain was slacking. So,
Right. No,
and this was
that's
just kind
right.
of a down year for Spain, maybe you could say, because they've done better in past tournaments and in FIBA.
Right. I
They're
think
getting
they're a
older.
good team, but yeah, they are getting older for sure. I think it was the beginning of this game, like, oh, I talked about them not having a dominant interior force, but Juancho Hernan Gomez was trying to do everything he could to punish Canada on the glass whenever they weren't boxing out or were, late to or not contesting rebounds as vigorously maybe as they would have if this was more of win a must-win type game like it was for Team Spain. But yeah, I did want to just talk a little bit about Jamal's
Yeah,
performance in
let's
this
get into
game.
that.
I did think that he didn't look quite as good against Spain as he did versus Australia. And,
Hmm.
versus Australia was already like, all right, there's some good, there's some bad. It's not great. I think at the beginning of the game in particular, his first stint, he was kind of forcing things on offense. And defensively, you saw the limitations that Jamal just has even when he's, at 100%. He's not like a great screen navigator. For example, gave up a couple of wide open threes when he went under in times when he doesn't necessarily need to. Sometimes um this wasn't just a Jamal issue, but it also happened to him where he's kind of uh pushing maybe a little too hard to fight over a screen and then fouls a three-point shooter. Just like that kind of stuff. But I thought starting from his second stint on, he was doing a better job of setting guys up on the bench. He had 6 assists in this game. Did have 3 turnovers. One of them in particular, I thought was one of those times where I wanted him to try to score, but instead he tried to force a pass through traffic. So it resulted in a turnover. I don't actually remember any other like egregious turnovers or anything like that, but he was being a good setup man, stopped forcing things. He was playing with good pace in particular, like he has really the whole tournament, despite the other um, struggles he may be having. He's not like walking the ball up the floor. He's definitely passing it up, getting the team into their half court offense, and like kind of semi transition offense a lot quicker than even I expected. So, that was good. Jamal's a very polarizing player
Yeah.
for Nuggets fans. And everyone wants to see him look amazing, but I just don't think, like you said in our last episode, it's probably not going to be his role on this team. But Andrew Nembhard
Oh,
has managed to carve out that niche for himself here.
yeah.
But if you wanted to say something about
Yeah,
Jamal,
I just want to wrap up some Jamal stuff. We went kind of extensively a little more about Jamal and how to set expectations for him because he's coming off an injury. Apparently, we don't know where he is along the lines with recovering with that injury. We don't know what his
he is still
mindset
on minutes
is.
restriction, right? It
Oh,
seems because
yes.
he's only played. I think the most he played was like 18 minutes in any of these games, and he played
Yeah,
only 17.
17. Yes, and he ended up with 4 points. He was a -4. He didn't make a three. He shot two, and it was 2 of 5 overall. Had six
Yeah, that
assists.
3-point shot.
Yeah, so he had 6 assists and 3 turnovers. The game against Australia had 5 assists, no turnovers. So I think it's a lot of the times I do want to see his passing because that's more of the role that he's playing for Team Canada. I think it's fair to like judge how he's doing in terms of facilitating, and I think he's creating more like eye-popping moments with some of his assists. So I'm happy about that. And I kind of was saying last episode and just on Twitter because it's been, he is polarizing and Nuggets fans are all debating Jamal right now. He's probably the most like hot topic to be discussing if you're a Nuggets fan. I think like there was kind of a backlash against the criticism. A lot of people were coming out in like support of him and saying, I think Jamal's a good player. And I kind of was getting to a point where I was just going to write off this whole Olympics almost, whether that's unfair or not, to just say, I don't even care how he looks in this Olympics. I'm just going to wait till the season starts before I'm like judging him. But the one thing that I kind of can't let go is the 3-point shot because it's just
Mm.
like, what is going on with that? Like, you should still be able to take some because, man, you'd think,
So
they're
you
not.
want the volume to go up.
I guess if the volume went up, his percent, he'd make more, right? But he's like, what, shooting 10% from three or
Ideally,
something?
but
It's
he's shooting
so
like
bad.
10% from three
Yeah.
right now.
So I don't even know about that. It's like he had that step back three against Australia, and I was like, oh, that looks like a Jamal
Yeah.
three. That's
But then
great.
you had the step back three versus Spain, and it was like, yikes.
Not good. Yeah, so it's like, how much do you need to see glimpses of to make you feel comfortable? And how often do you need to see those glimpses? And I guess you can fall on either side of that. You'd have to be pretty optimistic and like relaxed to be like, I only need to see one awesome step back three from Jamal to feel good. Like, because that's basically all we have right now. So I'm kind of wondering about that. I guess the calf, if he's still struggling with that, would explain it. But we also did see Kevin Durant play this Olympics, like you said on last episode. So it's also funny because I've been hearing people talk about Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and LeBron and AD, kind of these players who we know they're good, but in the regular season maybe get criticized more for not playing up to the standards we're traditionally used to with them. They're having
I feel like
amazing.
Booker is generally regarded as a very good
Yeah.
regular season player.
Yeah, I think Booker's the like exception, but because he'd been in some MVP like discussions within the past few years. All these players are playing really well for the USA, and I think a lot of the debate around that is pointing to just the overall talent of Team USA and the roles that the players are playing and how well they kind of fit them. But Kevin Durant can kind of transcend role because if he's just like on with his shot and he's just pulling up from anywhere, whether it's ISO or like
He's
catch
doing
and shoot,
whatever he needs
whatever,
to do. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
he can just succeed with that. With Jamal, I go back and forth then because I think, well, Canada has NBA players. The Olympics, there's players from all over the world, but if you're in the NBA, you are truly elite to play in that league. Like that is the best league in the world. It's like, could the talent on Canada still somehow open up some opportunities for Jamal the way it's kind of done for other star players on Team USA? But it seems like it's just agreed upon with him and the coaching staff and the players that he's kind of in this backseat role, which is why I am less concerned about him. So it's hard to like know what's real and what's not with Jamal right now.
Right. Oh, a real or fake. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do something like that at the end of the Olympics and talk about, whether these Olympic
Who was
performances
real
were
and who was fake?
real
Yeah.
or fake. Yeah, no, I'll just reiterate what I said before about Jamal. I never really cared about the stats, and I think the criticism for the lack of production, particularly regular season in the NBA, is just kind of whatever. It is what it is at this point. As long as he stays efficient like he normally is in the regular season, I don't really care. And obviously in the playoffs, the efficiency like tanked, right? Probably in large part due to the injury. I do think that the efficiency is more of a cause for concern in the Olympics, but not so much because his volume is so low that like the difference between going one of three and going two of three, like one more shot makes all that. And so that's just too small a sample size for me to care. I don't really care as much about the 3-point shooting, especially because it doesn't seem like that's like the directive in this Canada offense. Like they just don't. I will say, like, I still want him to look more comfortable when he gets those catch and shoot looks because he's still trying to do that pump fake and drive or whatever, and he's clearly not comfortable taking those shots. And then the pull up threes, they're hit or miss and they are low volume. I'm more concerned with how Jamal is moving, and I think I'm not concerned with it, but it's not great. I tweeted this or reposted someone did a compilation of his highlights from the 2023 Western Conference Finals, and I was like, "Holy crap! Like this is like a different player, even than we saw in like the regular season from Jamal, which it should be. Like that was literally an all-time playoff peak that he achieved in 2023. It was like what there were three players had ever averaged over 30 points in conference finals and 50 40 90 splits, and Jamal's one of them. Like that was crazy, but he was just like versatile shot creation. He was getting wherever he wanted on the floor, no hesitation on his shots. Like that's what I want to see, even if it is in small doses. Right now, we're getting it in excruciatingly small doses. And then we're getting larger sample sizes of him being more hesitant, less comfortable getting to his spots in large part because of his movement looking not limited, but certainly not. I wouldn't say that I'm looking for him to be explosive, but I'm just looking for him to like look fluid, look shifty, like all of the things that make his game what it is when he is um, at his best. The numbers themselves are whatever to me. It's more I'm literally just watching how he's
Hmm.
operating on the floor. And right now it's like meh. I'm not satisfied with it, but I'm not uber concerned at the same time. I will say that some have pointed out the fact that the Olympics are going to last another week, and then there are, I think, less than 8 weeks between then and the Nuggets training camp because the Nuggets and the Boston Celtics are playing a preseason game in Abu Dhabi earlier than everyone else starts their preseason, which means they're going to open their training camp early as well. Both Jokic and Jamal are probably going to have even more condensed off seasons than we anticipated because of the Olympics, because of this early start to their preseason. So that's going to be another layer of like maybe concern if you think that more rest is what they need. But yeah, I mean, he's this ongoing question. We always end up talking about him for longer than anticipated.
It's just so much speculation, but I think the way you laid it out is really fair. That it's not just about the stats; it's about what you're actually seeing on the court and just how he's moving, and like his role can explain the stats, but it
Right.
can't necessarily explain how he physically looks. So that is a very
Exactly.
fair point, and I think that's just really all that it comes down to. And the internet is a hostile environment often, and one thing I do know for sure is that Jamal is listening to it because I saw that he actually liked some tweets the other day about this.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm just
Our
hoping it motivates
chronically
him.
online.
Just hoping it motivates him at this point. That's all I can really ask. I was wondering though if Canada and France was like maybe the closest
So here's
game.
my thing with the Canada France matchup. I think behind Serbia, Australia, maybe understandably because Canada and Serbia aren't the top seeds. I think that this game has upset potential. We talked about how Wemby is the reason that France is a country that or a team that you think could theoretically medal at this competition, like realistically, like you could see the path.
Yeah,
The reason I think Canada in particular is vulnerable to an upset here is that their offense just has no flow to it versus a team like France that they know it. They're heavily reliant on their defense because their offense also like sputters for long stretches in large part because they are more limited in their guard play than these other teams. But sometimes like they have guys who can create their own shot that can create some timely buckets for themselves and for others. They have Wemby, who is kind of a nightmare for a lot of different players to try to deal with. I do think that Canada has the wing depth potentially to at least mitigate Wemby's impact, but you never know how France is going to decide to actually use him. Canada's offense, hot mess. France's offense, also a hot mess. But France's defense, it's Rudy, it's Wemby, it's Bilal Koulibaly, it's Nicholas Batum. There's just a lot of length on the court. It makes like running a half court offense incredibly difficult. They're going to force a lot of turnovers. I think both teams are going to try to do basically the same things. The sort of difference between the two being that Canada's going to struggle to finish defensive possessions because they don't have the same size on the front line that France does in Rudy and Wemby. And Wemby is the rebounder that he is, which is like kind of a question mark really at this point because we only saw him play at the five for like half a season. He's playing at the five for France for large stretches now. We even saw in the last group play game versus Germany that Ruby didn't start in the second half, so they were staggering him more. I don't know if that was to make Wemby's minutes more efficient or to make the bench minutes less, like non-Wemby minutes less atrocious. Um, but that's just going to be something to watch. Is France going to struggle to rebound because Rudy is like their main guy, or is Canada going to struggle more because of, like they have their own size limitations and all of that. So that's going to be it's interesting that the both teams kind of have the same weaknesses, except you'd think that Canada would be able to muster up a little bit more consistent offense because they should have better guard play than France. And it's not just SGA, obviously. It's not even just Jamal. They also have Andrew Nembhard, who we shouted out already, that are able to create both their own shots, but also for others. So that's going to be what I'm watching in this game is like who makes the other team's offense look nastier. And that game has really
Right.
high potential to be just ugly.
Yeah, I feel like on like just I would assume France's defense would be able to impact what Canada is doing on offense more than the other way around, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So it is going to be really close. Feeling confident Serbia is going to win, but your points are making me realize it's maybe closer than I would have thought just initially. But Canada and France, I still am looking like I don't even know who I was going to pick initially. Nemhard though has been playing really well, and I'll just say it now before we don't have time to talk about it that his contract's looking better and better as this Olympics go on. And while I've said I'm not going to let this Olympics determine how I feel about Jamal, I am going to be maybe hypocritical and say I'm going to let it affect how I feel about Nemhard because he's looking awesome. And
Well,
yeah,
I think Nemhard's contract looked like a steal even before the Olympics because he
yeah.
looked great last regular season, particularly after I think it was after they traded Bruce that Nemhard starting in that shooting guard position, basically. Having that secondary ball handler next to Tyrese, and he can also, run certain units when Halliburton was out. Obviously, the Pacers have lots and lots of guards. Please give us one of them. Please let it be TJ McConnell. But yeah, that $18 million a year extension is just a huge steal. And I'm like, why aren't our players have, terrible agents like some of
Yeah.
these guys?
Yeah, losing
Um,
KCP for that amount of money, regardless of how good he is, but like keep a role player like that, especially a guard and a guard who can score like Nemhard can, for that amount of money
With
is
kind of
just
all-star potential, like, he's in the Eastern Conference. I could see Nembhard making an
yeah, that's
all-star
true.
game, all-star team in the next few years, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
depending on how the development goes, but I think regardless, like that number in a couple of years is gonna look like it's like this
oh,
is
an absolute
absurd,
steal.
like
Absolute
Derek
steal.
White level upsetting
Yeah,
contract.
yeah. I mean, it is. Like, that's
Yeah,
what he's literally making Derek White money
money
now
now.
before the salary cap jumps.
That's
Like,
true.
I think it's just, like, malpractice, frankly,
Mm-hmm.
and, I think some of these guys need to just kind of shop around and try to make sure that their agents aren't,
Yeah.
um,
I
you
really
know,
want to go back and
terrible.
look at that draft with him because I think the Wolves could have drafted him.
Well,
And
everybody could have because he
he
went
was
31st, right?
oh okay, yeah. Oh, that was a mistake. I remember watching him on Gonzaga, when I was watching Strother on Gonzaga and Jalen Suggs and stuff, and I was like, I liked Nemhard then too. So I've still been kind of following him even in the NBA. And his younger brother is on Gonzaga right now. So I
Oh.
wonder if little Nemhard can be good someday. I don't think he doesn't look as good as Andrew Nemhard does back on Gonzaga at this point in college, but who knows? Interesting to watch him.
It just occurred to me that we have two Zags for Team Canada right now, and Nemhard and
Olynyk,
Kelly
yeah.
Olynyk, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the bronze medal game, we're going to have Canada versus Serbia, which is where we get to see the heavyweight matchup of Jokic versus Jamal Murray. So that should be an
Yes.
interesting game. I know Voya said that Serbia is not good in bronze medal games. So, that wouldn't be great. But I also think that, like, we talked about Canada's issues with size, but we also talked about the athleticism advantage they may have over Serbia.
Let's do our predictions.
Mine is USA gold medal, Germany silver medal, and Serbia bronze. So
Right.
yeah, one of those top four teams is going to be left on the outs, at least one.
USA in the gold. How about that for spicy? And then Canada silver medal, and then I'll go Serbia bronze. We're almost to 500 subscribers. So to those of you who've already
Yay.
subscribed, thank you so much. We love you. And if you haven't yet, please consider doing so. And like the video if you're watching, send our episodes to your friends and tell everyone about it. We really appreciate you guys listening and commenting. Let us know who you think might win the tournament if it's not the USA. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. And remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.
Big time.